In the Second World War, it was not only armies that clashed, wills collided. In the Russian ice, a hardened marshal became both hammer and anvil, stopping the Wehrmacht and driving it back. Under the desert sun, a German fox moved his pieces like a chess master, fast and lethal. In the Pacific, American admirals bent Japan's destiny from flight decks burning with propellers and steel. And from Africa to Europe, a British lion restored the heartbeat of his army and led it toward victory. Different, decisive, decisions that tilted battles and changed the century. Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov rose from the harshest poverty of rural Russia to become the most celebrated commander of the Soviet Union. Trained in the brutal discipline of the Red Army, he forged himself into an inflexible and calculating leader. His first major leap came in 1939 when he defeated the Japanese army at Khalkhin Gol. A crushing victory that not only secured the eastern border, but also placed him firmly on Stalin's radar.
Went out, quickly organized the defenses, and he brilliantly took charge of coordinated attacks against the Japanese using artillery, air, and tanks in coordinated actions. Sort of a first ever for the Russians. He also replaced weak commanders, sometimes ruthlessly, until he found the commanders who could attack the Japanese. He used deception to great advantage.
From that moment on, Zhukov became the inevitable piece on the Soviet chessboard. In 1941, when Hitler's armies reached the gates of Moscow, it was Zhukov who reorganized the defenses and launched the winter counteroffensive that halted the German advance.
The Soviets were really under a great deal of pressure. They had already evacuated the city in many cases. The government had been shifted over to Kubyshev, and Moscow was two-thirds surrounded by the Germans. The Germans could see the spires of Moscow from their positions, and Zhukov came through with a brilliant counter move and saved the situation.
That victory saved the capital and gave the Soviet people certainty that the Wehrmacht was not invincible. But his legacy did not end there. Later, he played a key role in planning Operation Uranus, which encircled the German Sixth Army at Stalingrad and marked the beginning of the great Soviet offensive toward the west. In 1943, he supervised the defense of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, where he wore down Germany's last major offensive attempt in the east. 2 years later, in 1945, he led the final assault on Berlin. The crossing of the Oder, the blood-soaked Seelow Heights, and finally the Red Army's entry into the Nazi capital. Zhukov became the face of Soviet victory, the man who received Germany's surrender. His style was brutal. He did not hesitate to sacrifice thousands of men to achieve an objective. But behind that ruthlessness stood a tactical and logistical genius who understood modern war, moving entire armies, keeping them supplied, and striking at the precise moment. After the war, his prestige made him a liability in Stalin's eyes, and he was sidelined and closely watched.
Вот такой факт я могу привести, что всю жизнь, почти до самого, так сказать, вот до 1957 года, до последних, так сказать, событий, постоянно был приготовлен мамой чемоданчик, в котором были туалетные принадлежности и пара смен белья, на тот случай, что если за ним придут и будут его арестовывать, чтобы быстро собраться и уйти без, так сказать, сборов.
He died in 1974, already a legend. The marshal who crushed Nazi Germany. Erwin Rommel, a career German officer, earned early fame during the First World War for his audacity on the battlefield. During the Second World War, he became the most admired commander of the Third Reich, even among his enemies. Hitler placed him in command of the Afrika Korps in 1941, and there Rommel unleashed his full tactical brilliance.
Erwin Rommel basically gets sent to North Africa to save the Italians' bacon, block the advance of the British forces, keep the Italians in the war, and keep the Mediterranean contested.
In the sands of North Africa, his armored units advanced and withdrew with a speed that disoriented the British, earning him the nickname the Desert Fox. With fewer resources than his opponents, Rommel exploited surprise and mobility. He struck, encircled, and disappeared before his enemies could react. His campaign turned him into a legend, a general who led from the front, shared risks with his men, and avoided the atrocities tolerated by other Nazi officers. His reputation as a gentleman soldier crossed enemy lines.
There are lots of stories of him literally being at the front, including when they were crossing the River Meuse under fire from the French. He actually went across in one of the first assault boats himself. He became sort of a poster boy for the German army, and Goebbels had given him a camera personally, and a lot of the photography he took found its way back and was used for propaganda purposes.
But his fortune began to turn in 1942. The breaking of the Enigma codes, Allied air superiority, and the overwhelming industrial capacity of his enemies weakened the Afrika Korps. At El Alamein, Rommel faced a decisive battle where the Allied push stopped and reversed his advances. Forced to retreat back to Tunisia, he was eventually evacuated to Europe. Hitler later assigned him to fortify the Atlantic Wall as an Allied landing loomed. Although Rommel attempted to strengthen defenses and propose new strategies, he clashed with the Führer's rigidity, which denied him freedom of action. After the Normandy landings, his disillusionment with the Nazi leader deepened. In 1944, his name became linked to the circle of conspirators behind the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. Although his direct involvement was minimal, the regime forced him to choose: face a trial that would endanger his family or take his own life in silence. Rommel chose cyanide on October 14, 1944. The Third Reich granted him a state funeral, concealing the truth. He died as he lived, with the aura of an honorable soldier trapped within an infamous regime. In the days following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States was stunned and Japan seemed unstoppable. In that moment of uncertainty, Admiral Chester William Nimitz assumed command of the Pacific Fleet. Calm and methodical, Nimitz was not a man of theatrical gestures or grand speeches, but a strategist who understood the scale of the challenge. Controlling an immense ocean and wearing down an enemy that still held the initiative.
Nimitz was promoted 2 ranks to full 4-star admiral and ordered to go to Hawaii immediately to take command of the Pacific Fleet, or, well, what was left of it anyway. The Pacific Fleet had been decimated by the attack. The USS Arizona was sitting at the bottom of the harbor, a tomb for more than 1,000 of her crew. USS Oklahoma had capsized. USS Nevada had been intentionally grounded by a captain to prevent her sinking. In all, 8 battleships were either sunk or damaged so badly that they were out of action.
Despite the grim outlook, Nimitz rose to the challenge, and his first great test came in June 1942 at Midway. Thanks to signals intelligence that uncovered Japanese plans, he set a masterful ambush. With patience, he positioned his carriers and waited for the precise moment. The result was devastating. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, the backbone of their fleet, were sunk in just a few days. Midway became a turning point. Japan was forced onto the defensive, and the United States regained confidence.
The victory did wonders for the morale of the troops as well as the American public, who cheered their first real victory after 6 months of bad news. The Japanese ability to attack Hawaii again had been largely neutralized by their defeat at Midway, so Nimitz decided to go on the offensive.
From that point on, Nimitz implemented his island-hopping strategy. Rather than attacking every fortified Japanese position, he advanced selectively, isolating garrisons and concentrating force where the blow would be most effective. Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa became iconic names of a campaign that steadily pushed the United States closer to the Japanese home islands. His genius lay not in spectacle, but in flawless coordination. Fleets, carrier aviation, marines, and ground armies operated as parts of a colossal machine. Nimitz knew how to delegate, trust his subordinate commanders, and always maintain a long-term strategic vision. The climax of his career came on September 2nd, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. There, before Japanese delegates, he witnessed the surrender that ended the war. With characteristic calm, the man who defeated Japan returned to Texas, greeted by massive tributes. In naval history, his name endures as the architect of victory in the Pacific. Douglas MacArthur was a figure larger than life. Theatrical, proud, visionary, and controversial. The son of an American war hero, he grew up destined for prominence. During the Second World War, he became the emblematic figure of the Allied effort in the South Pacific. His magnetic personality inspired devotion among his soldiers and suspicion among some politicians, but no one could deny his strategic instinct. In 1942, after the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, MacArthur was forced to evacuate the islands. From Australia, he delivered his famous promise, "I shall return." Those words became both a personal vow and a symbol for millions of Filipinos and Americans.
It was both a promise and a declaration of intent. Though MacArthur and his most trusted friends had been forced to withdraw and regroup from the advance of the Japanese army, he vowed that he would not be defeated. He promised that he would return to the Philippines to liberate the country and complete the work that he'd begun.
For 2 years, while Nimitz advanced through the Central Pacific, MacArthur planned the reconquest of the South Pacific. combining land and amphibious operations that steadily eroded Japanese resistance in New Guinea and beyond. He fulfilled his promise in October 1944 when he led the landings at Leyte. Standing in the rain, he proclaimed his return. Beyond the drama of the moment, his comeback marked the beginning of the end for Japanese forces in the Philippines.
MacArthur arrived off the beach of Leyte in the Philippines. Wading ashore from where his whaleboat had been grounded in knee-deep water, MacArthur stood on the beach and declared, "I have returned. By the grace of Almighty God, our forces stand again on Philippine soil."
Through a fierce campaign that included the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, MacArthur reclaimed the archipelago and restored American authority in a crucial region. What made him unique was not only his theatrical flair, but his vision of war as a political and moral act. He understood that every gesture, image, and word could inspire and shape public perception. He was a military strategist, but also an architect of collective morale. After Japan's surrender, MacArthur was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied occupation. Under his supervision, Japan was rebuilt, demilitarized, and given a new democratic constitution. His career did not end there. During the Korean War, his clash with the White House over strategy led to his dismissal in 1951. Retired from service, he delivered memorable speeches reaffirming his famous line, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away." Thus ended his public life, as a national myth, loved and criticized, but never forgotten. Bernard Law Montgomery, known simply as Monty, was the British commander who restored confidence and victories to an army battered by defeats in North Africa. Cold, meticulous, and demanding, he was a man of iron discipline and obsessive preparation. Born in 1887, Montgomery was shaped by the First World War and rose as an officer who tolerated no improvisation. That rigidity, which often irritated colleagues and superiors, proved decisive when Britain needed a victory to lift national morale. In 1942, Churchill placed him in command of the British 8th Army, a force weary and retreating before Erwin Rommel. Montgomery imposed order, reorganized command structures, and above all, convinced his soldiers that victory was possible.
And before Montgomery could attack, he had to train his inexperienced men in night fighting and mine clearance and convince them that they were up to the task.
We're standing now in what became Montgomery's command caravan at the time of Alamein. It was a caravan captured from an Italian general earlier in 1942, and Montgomery found it useful as both an office and a place in which he could catch a little rest.
Without question, El Alamein was his masterpiece. There, after weeks of meticulous preparation, he launched a massive offensive that shattered German and Italian lines. Before El Alamein, we never had a victory. After El Alamein, we never had a defeat, Churchill declared. That phrase captured the battle's symbolic importance. Montgomery's prestige made him a key figure in Allied strategy in Europe. He took part in planning the Normandy landings and commanded forces during the subsequent advance into Germany. His blunt style and constant friction with Eisenhower and Patton earned him a reputation for ego, but also ensured that British operations were executed with exceptional precision. What set him apart was his obsession with preparation and troop morale. Monty did not seek personal glory, but reliable results, even if that meant caution or slow progress. His soldiers trusted him because they believed he would not send them into battle without a solid chance of success.
Montgomery clearly understood the importance of morale, and as time went on, as he met more and more of those under his command, he passed on to them a supreme confidence in the possibility of victory. And by the end, everyone believed that this was the great chance.
He ended the war as one of Britain's great commanders, honored as a national hero and criticized for his difficult character. His legacy was that of a leader who, through patience and calculation, halted Rommel, led in Europe, and restored Britain's faith in victory. 5 men, 5 styles, 5 destinies that shaped the greatest war in history. Zhukov, Rommel, Nimitz, MacArthur, and Montgomery embody the complexity of a conflict where individual genius could alter the fate of entire nations. They were neither flawless heroes nor absolute villains, but strategists with virtues and shadows, trapped on a board that consumed millions of lives. Their names became inseparable from battles that defined the 20th century, reminding us that in war, the decisions of a few can change the destiny of all.